Diplomatic relations between South Africa and the United States continue to deteriorate over the past few months, and the relationship looks far from being mended. US President Donald Trump also cut funding to health programs over reports of a genocide against Afrikaners. Let's unpack the nuances of the relationship with international relations and diplomacy expert, Professor Anthoni van Nieuwkerk, who is joining us in studio. Prof, thank you so much for joining us this evening. And what a year it has been when you just look at South Africa and US relations. I mean, from the G20, whether they're going to send somebody or not, and then we realize, of course, that's not going to happen, not attending some G20 meetings, the Trump tariff wars, of course, the Ramaphosa and the Oval Office, and the list goes on. And now it just seems to just be getting even longer.
Yeah, and worse. And it might not, next year might not start on a good footing either, unfortunately. So yes, I was searching desperately before appearing here on the interview of any bit of good international news that might give us a bit of a boost, you know, before the year end. A breakthrough in science or technology or medicine or some real Nobel Prize winner of some sort, whatever it is. But the international relations and diplomacy news are not good. So many of us expected at the beginning of the year that there will be significant progress in Gaza with Palestine. Yeah. And that has not really happened. We can discuss that. That Ukraine will come to an end somehow. It's getting worse. A war of attrition, really. And in Africa, that there might be, you know, green sprouts, as they say, good leadership in the form of President Ramaphosa, successful with BRICS, successful with the G20. But it's not the story. The story is Sudan, the Eastern DRC, violent extremism in the Sahel, the rollback of democracy, and a very depressed international economic situation. So all in all, we have to really bite on our teeth and understand what the drivers are that has brought us here before we try and understand 2026.
Prof, what would you say the drivers are?
Yeah. At the heart of this turmoil we see is a very deep change in international relations, where we are faced, in my view, by a declining superpower in the West, which is the American hegemon, if you want, superpower, still very powerful and influential, but losing its grip on the international terrain, which sees the rise of the global South, and in particular, the rise of the dragon in the East, which is China, who's become very ambitious. It's taking a lot of nations, countries with it in the form of the BRICS alliance, and has got its own ambitious foreign policy. And I think the Americans are trying to work out what to do to maintain their own power and influence in the world. And they are really struggling.
And talking about maintaining that power, you know, some argue that Trump has basically rewritten the rules of geopolitics.
Yeah, he's thrown what people call the rules-based international order, the liberal rules-based international world order, out of the window. He's not a liberal. I think he's a nationalist. He believes in America comes first. He's got no time for liberal tendencies. This idea of a developmental program around the G20, equity, debt forgiveness, caring for the nature, climate change, the role of women, and so on, he's thrown it out of the window in one fell swoop. We've got nothing left to show for the G20. We are not at the table, at the seat anymore, as we speak this month. And so that agenda is changing quite radically. In fact, the Americans have now produced their national security strategy, which is their document to tell us quite openly what it is they want in the next, period of time. And they've written off Africa really and Europe, in fact, and say we're not prepared to invest in you unless you've got energy sources and critical minerals that we can tap into. Then you're important. And there are African countries that are important in that respect. So the politics are shifting. South Africa is less of the flavor of the month. And I must say, Masa, the new American ambassador will arrive at our shores very soon. And we will have to bite on our teeth because he's not a professional diplomat. He's a political appointment, and he's carrying the Trump message in his pocket to share with us as the nation.
I mean, we had our very own ambassador to the US this year also being expelled back to South Africa.
Yes.
We also had, tensions with the previous ambassador, Brigitte, as well. So what hopes are there for this new ambassador when you're also mentioning that he's quite Trumpian?
Yeah, so he's Trumpian, yeah. We have to trump him at his own game. My view is I hope our government accept his credentials. He gets appointed as the ambassador. We need ambassadors because they are lines of communication. And it's good to have him closer to home. And so you can bring him here to the studio and talk to him. That's an advantage to better understand the Trump worldview and how South Africa should position itself. I don't believe we should go and enter into a debate with this ambassador, this politician really, to change his mind. AfriForum and Solidarity, they've made up his mind for him, that genocide business. And in fact, he's here on a mission to get the South African government to step back from that International Court of Justice case against Israel. He also wants us to pivot away from China and towards America. Let's accept that that is his message and his mission and engage him on the areas where I think South Africa and America, not the Trump administration, but America is much bigger than just Trump, where we can work together. I'll give you a quick example. There's not going to be peace in Sudan or in the Sahel without American, or in the DRC, without partnering in some or other way with the Americans. They have the hard power. We might have diplomacy and soft power, the power of influence, but they have the airplanes that can move and lift and transport and do all of that kind of stuff. We need them in a way, and we need to put our national interests in front of this new ambassador.
Yeah. You touched on Gaza as well as Sudan, what's also going on in the DRC. When it comes to the DRC and Rwanda, Trump also took quite a bit of credit to say, got these leaders in a room together, but there's still an ongoing war. There's still an ongoing war in Gaza as well as we speak. So what are the prospects for 2026 when it comes to international relations? And the focus will be on the United States and the G20.
Yeah. So hotspots, South or Latin America, Venezuela, lots of oil reserves. There's a war brewing. Sudan will not end anytime soon. It's a long discussion, but the parties to the conflict are not ready to make compromises, despite the best efforts of the AU, the African Union, and other mediators. Gaza and Palestine with Netanyahu will not be resolved as long as Netanyahu is there. Ukraine, the Europeans are really panicking because they want to win the war against the Russians in Ukraine, and the Americans have just walked away when you read the national security strategy. So the Europeans are left high and dry. So they have today or yesterday invested more money into Zelensky's effort to beat the Russians at their own game. So it's a war of attrition. In all of these cases that I've mentioned, it's not going to end very soon. And even if it does, Masa, some kind of peace deal is signed, like the DRC, how do you restore balance in the theater of war where hundreds and thousands and millions of people have become victims of violent warfare? There's a humanitarian crisis in all of these places that we're talking about. It'll take years for stability to be recovered. And who's going to invest into these war zones when at home economics are pressing? Whether you're a European or a South African or an American, things are more difficult going forward.
Prof, before I let you go, South Africa relations with Europe in particular, we saw a good force of support at the G20 by European leaders, almost kind of sticking it to the US as well to say, you didn't come, but we support and we are behind Cyril Ramaphosa and South Africa.
Yes.
How has this strengthened the relationship between South Africa and Europe as a continent?
Yeah, our new friends. I mean, the smiling Europeans, they were smiling throughout the whole G20. And of course, they took vacations before, during, and after. Our new best friends. Well, I think they are here in their own interests. They are selling us this so-called just transition, this energy transition from coal or fossil fuels to clean forms of energy. And they are giving us money to do this, but I think it's in their own interests, not necessarily our interest. There's big debates here at home over whether we should actually follow this path. Despite this, the Europeans remain important. It's our biggest trading partner as a bloc, the EU and SADC, as are the Americans. So I want to say this, we shouldn't, whether we like Trump or not, or the EU playing some kind of a bluffing game because they've lost their place in Africa, they're trying to regain, it doesn't matter. We need to find a way to balance our trade relations. What we make, we should export, and the government of national unity must prioritize building trade relations with the North and the South, the East and the West, and of course, not forgetting Africa as maybe the core of our trade strategy. That requires a lot of investment, a lot of leadership, a lot of hard work. Now in December, we want to take leave and not think about the hard stuff. But come January and February, I can tell you, the hard work will have to continue. We've just been appointed the chair of SADC, because in Madagascar there was a semi-coup, and they handed back the SADC chair. Now we have the chairship of this regional bloc for about 2 years. We have to make something out of it. Yes.
Well, there's lots to look forward to for 2026, a lot that happened in 2025. Unfortunately, as you said, not too many of those green shoots that we can talk about. But I look forward to hearing more of your insights in the new year. Thank you so much for your time and coming into studio. Of course, that was our international relations and diplomacy expert, Professor Anthoni van Nieuwkerk, who joined us now in studio.